All right, it's 10 a.m., so let's go ahead and get started here. I'm J. Michael Morelli from ON1 here, coming at you with this Getting Started webinar for ON1 Photo RAW 2018.5. Before I get going here, let me just make sure my audio is all good. Dylan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mo. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear. Awesome. So those of you who are just joining us, if this is your first webinar, we do have a Q&A module that you can ask any questions to Dylan Kotecki, my cohort there you just heard from. So any questions you have as I'm moving through this webinar, feel free to ask him. He can answer them for you or pass them right up to me and I can answer them or show you anything that you need to see again. I am going to launch a poll right now for everyone who is attending. Just a few quick questions to gauge your level of use in ON1 Photo RAW, how long you've owned it, just a few basic things there. So this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted to our blog, our YouTube, and our Facebook later today. So if you need to duck out at any time, feel free to do so. And yeah, like I said, this is a getting started webinar. We're going to spend some time covering a lot of the basic getting started elements of each module. We're not going to move too much into the advanced aspects, but yeah, this should be a great getting started webinar for anyone who is new to ON1 Photo RAW. So with that, I will go ahead and get started here. So for those of you new, ON1 Photo RAW 2018 combines the simplicity of a browser with the power of a RAW processor and an effects engine, all in a layered, non-destructive workflow. So you can see here, I'm actually in my browse module of ON1 Photo RAW right now. I can easily look through my photos. These are all just on my machine. Nothing has actually been imported into Photo RAW. These are all just connected via folders on my computer, connected cloud storages or external hard drives that I might have connected here. So it's very easy for me to find any photo that I have connected or on my machine without any wait time. I don't have to import or wait for my catalogs and my library to fulfill itself. I can just simply navigate through my files and my folders very easily. You'll also notice here in the Browse module that I have some different options down here for viewing. I can also use hotkeys on my keyboard, but if you want to just get a base level look at what these do, all I'm going to do is select an image here. I have a full screen view. I also have a film strip view, which is actually the view that I prefer the most here. And I also have a compare view that I can get to. I'll get into that a little bit later here. So anytime you're in Browse, hitting the G key will get you right back to your grid view, and hitting the F key will get you in your film strip view. And one of the big benefits of using both grid and film strip view in the browse is it allows me to rate and organize and cull my photos better. One example here, you can see these stars up at the top here. I could simply just click and give this photo either a 2-star, a 3-star, a 4-star rating just by clicking here. I can also give it a red, yellow, green, or blue tag, but you can also see there's those numbers there, and those numbers correspond to my keyboard. So one thing I can do to make this whole process of organizing and rating faster is I can just come into my film strip view here and simply click a 1 on my keyboard and it'll add 1 star there. I can hit a 2 and it'll add a 2-star there, a 3, a 4, 5. So as I'm hitting numbers on my keyboard, you can see that it's adding those stars to the photo and giving them a rating for me to go back and organize or look at those photos of a certain rating again. To take that a step further, I can hit a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, or the 0 key and add a different color rating, which is particularly helpful if you're shooting a model in a location or a certain scene and you want to kind of clump those together in a folder. And then also the P key on the keyboard will give us a pick for a heart so that we can easily filter this whole folder and find exactly the photo we're looking for. So I'll just do that real fast. I'll jump back to my grid view, hitting G, and you can see there's my ratings on those photos I've just added. Now, if I wanted to sort this grid view, I can do that right down here, and I can actually sort by the rating. I can sort by some other options here, but I'm going to sort by the rating for right now so that you can see, looks like I have it set to descending, my mistake, but you can see all of my 5-star photos here are at the bottom because I have that set to the ascending view of my rating. So anything that I've rated here, I can organize. I can even take that a step further in the filters menu if I only wanted to see my my 5-star photos for a folder. I could simply click on this filters pane, click 5 stars, and anything that I've 5-starred in that folder is going to appear in here for me once I click this filters area. So that's just kind of a basic way that you can rate and tag your photos, or sorry, rate and organize your photos a little bit better. And for those of you who might have been using for ON1 Photo RAW for a little bit, you probably noticed when I was in the film strip view that as I was hitting a rating there, it actually advanced my photo for me automatically. So you can actually turn that on right up in the photo menu. There is an auto advance feature. And I like to have this on myself in the browse module, but you know, if you don't have that turned on, and if I click on my keyboard here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, P, it's just going to add my different ratings and color tags to that so that I can find that easier. But when I have that turned on under Photo Auto Advance, it's going to move me forward automatically. So I'm just going to hit I'm going to hit 5 on my keyboard. So it's going to add a 5-star as I move through these. And you'll just see here, whoops, looks like I'm still set by ratings. Let me change that there. So as I hit this 5-star, you can see it's adding my 5 stars to the image here. And I'll jump back to grid view here. So just a way that you can organize, that you can find exactly what you're looking for very easily. You'll also notice that there's some RAW files in here. There's some JPEGs, there's some DNG files. There's no wait time. So if I am in film strip, I can just click through my arrow. I can easily add ratings, and I'm not having to wait on these photos to load up to get a preview of what they look like before I even want to start editing. This is just the browse module. Nothing's been imported here. As I mentioned, everything is just on my machine. So that's kind of the basics of the browse module here. Now, you'll also notice that there are some keywords and some metadata elements that you can add throughout. We'll get into that a little bit later. This is actually something that a lot of photographers, including myself, use quite a bit to search and organize their photos. An example of that would be using this filters pane as well. I can search for, you know, example, all of my photos that I shot on the, oops, let me actually make sure I'm in the search field. All the photos that I shot in the Oregon coast, or on the Oregon coast, I can pull up. Let me actually turn off that rating so you can see all of them there. So all my Oregon coast photos, I can filter and I can search and find just my Oregon coast photos. You know, if you want to take that another level, a few of you probably saw that when I had the 5 stars selected, it only showed me my 5-star Oregon coast photo. You know, you can even go even farther and change that to time of day. If you wanted to find only your photos that were shot in the morning on the Oregon coast, or maybe at sunset on the Oregon coast, you can just easily do that right from the filters area. To add on to that, there's also albums, which albums are kind of like filters that you set up that are going to remain in place. So you can see here I have a 5 stars album. This is going to auto update. So anytime I add 5 stars to an image throughout, it's going to add it to this album. You know, same with ocean. So you can set up albums to your own customizable liking. It's a very quick way to find a client's photos that you're trying to show them. You know, anything you want to put on Facebook, for example. Looks like we have website and Squarespace set up here as well that you can easily jump into. We also have tethered shooting as well. So any of you studio shooters out there, right from within Browse, you can do your tethered shooting. This is a great spot to do, you know, any kind of photo boosts or any studio stuff. And that is pretty much the basics of the Browse module. But to go a step further, you know, what if I actually want to start organizing and making subfolders inside of Browse? Well, that's very easy for me to do. And one of the great things about ON1 Photo RAW is anything that I do inside of the Browse module is going to also happen on my machine. So if I were to add a new folder inside of here, just by, let's say I want to add, let's add a couple of these photos here because they're all the same. into a folder, and I'll just choose the ones I want by shift clicking. I will right click and choose add subfolder. You can also rename the files. I use this quite a bit as well, but I prefer to start out with add subfolder as I'm kind of narrowing down a folder. And so what I'll just make this is Bella bench shot, and then I'll move those selected items, or I could copy them. I prefer to move them just to kind of whittle down my folders as I go on. And so this is actually going to show up now on my machine. So you can see Bella here. I now have Bella bench shot added, and I also have Bella Smith folder. This is what's on my hard drive right now. So it's just an easy way for you to keep organizing, keep whittling down your photo shoot. And you know, another step further to that would be if you're trying to actually whittle down a specific image, you know, into the best of this series, for example. So I'm just going to, just like I was adding a subfolder, I'm going to shift and click these photos that are kind of the same, and I'm going to come into my compare view right here. And compare view, it's I mean, it's very straightforward, but the great thing about this is it's going to allow me to zoom in on all of these and to lock and pan that zoom if I want to. So portrait shooters out there, you know, senior portraits, weddings, you know, this is really, really great at narrowing down exactly which face you want to use, or, you know, which image you want to use, which has the best face of your client. So hitting the slash key and, you know, using that on my keyboard, I can knock out which photos I actually do not like from this series, just hitting backslash there. And what I like to do is just kind of whittle this down until I find, you know, my favorite, at least my favorite two of these photos. And then I'll go ahead and give those a pick. Looks like I already picked those there with the heart, with the P key. But I like to do that just so that I know these were my favorites. You know, I gave all three of these 5 stars because I liked them, but, you know, the pick usually is my favoriteest photo in that series. So again, hitting the G key will take me right back to my grid view. These are just ways to organize, to find exactly what you want to start editing on. You know, I haven't actually edited anything just yet. I'm just moving through my browse folders, or my browse module in my folders rather. You know, clicking my breadcrumbs, getting back to where I need to find different photos. So it's very easy to navigate. It's very straightforward. These are photos on my computer. Nothing has actually been imported into ON1 Photo RAW, which, before I ask for any questions, I am going to show off the import dialog, the import drawer that we have feature. So the import feature that we have isn't actually importing anything into ON1 Photo RAW. It's more of a copy from a card or a download from a camera into a folder type of a feature. So, you know, as soon as you go up to File and Import, this import dialog is going to pop up. You'll be able to choose your source. I already have a memory card connected here, and you can see I have some photos from the Japanese gardens that I could import very easily. I'm not going to do that right now. But if you remember me talking about that metadata earlier in the keywords and keywording, this import dialog, when I'm taking images off of my camera, this is where I'm going to add that metadata that's important to me. I'm going to change the name of the file if I want to. I'm going to make a new destination folder for this series. I'll probably call it, you know, Japanese gardens, and I'll try and be as descriptive, or, you know, as to the point as I can be with all of my renaming, with my folders. So I'll just change this to Japanese gardens PDX, and I can change my serial number. I have different options if you wanted to change it to date or the actual current name if you have that set in your camera. I don't worry about that because I'm going to use this import dialog every time. And I'm going to add the keyword Japanese gardens so that when I use that filters panel over here, I'm going to be able to find all these photos very easily. I could also add a preset if I was, you know, shooting with a ring light and had a color cast, or, you know, shooting with some kind of a light that added a color cast. I could fix that very easily with a preset by adding that onto here. So just very easy ways to get yourself started in the right direction, at least organize your photos. Again, nothing is being imported into ON1 Photo RAW. This is merely a copy, a download from, we call it import because it, it makes sense, but yeah, that's the basics of that. That's the basics of ON1 Photo RAW, the browse module. So Dylan, are there any questions while I cruise over some of these poll results?
No, not as of right now. When I get one, I'll let you know, but you're doing great, man.
All right, awesome. So yeah, it looks like this is the first webinar for a few people here. So feel free to use that Q&A module with Dylan. He can pass anything up to me. I can answer it. This is being recorded, so if you need to duck out, you can jump back on our blog and YouTube, Facebook later. Get back and check this out if you need to. Before I move on, I'm just cruising over some of these question results. So, okay, great. Looks like a lot of you are kind of middle of the road, a little more advanced on the photo editing side. And it looks like quite a bit of you are curious about layers, effects, and develop, kind of a three-way tie. So, okay, great. Well, I'll just jump right into the develop module then. That's probably a great place for us to start. That's where I would start next, at least. And I'm going to choose this photo here. And the develop module is where you are going to fix your tone and color, fix your details, do your overall raw corrections. You can see here this has some, really underexposed in the front, but it's a great composition, at least to me. So I can get started on this. First thing I'm going to do is just move down the tone and color panel. And as you can see, as I move this slider, I'm getting a real-time view of actually what's happening. So it's great for me to see how each one of these is going to affect my photo. And the first thing that jumps out at me in this photo is the sky. So I'm actually going to tone this down just so I can get a little more of a dramatic looking sky out of this, because I know I can bring this back with my shadow and mid-tone recovery slider down here. So I'm just going to move these up. And this real-time preview, like I said, it's great for, shadows, midtones especially. But what I prefer to use this for is to find my clipping point on my whites and my blacks. And by hitting the J key on my keyboard, I can actually see in red where my whites are being clipped and in blue where my blacks are being clipped. And you can't see much black right now because I don't have, so there we go. There's some blue for you to see when the blacks are true black. There's no image detail there for anything to read. Same with the whites. So, if this were to, be overexposed, you would see a lot of that red-white clipping in the sky up there. So this is just a good way to kind of get your bearings set. At least I like to get my bearings set using this J key. Just taking your finger off the J key will show you what it looks like without those clipping warnings there. So let me tone back these highlights just a little bit until I have just a smidge of the red. And I'm going to bring up my midtones a little bit more. And I'll probably bring those blacks back to a very subtle amount there. So just some basic ways that you can correct the image with the raw processing capabilities in there. You also have your different, your temperature, your tint, your saturation. I might tone back this saturation just a little bit so that the sun glow doesn't look too fake. But one thing you guys might find yourself doing quite a bit is fixing your white balance. And one tool that I use quite a bit is this eyedropper. I'll get to that in a moment. One thing I really like, though, is if I'm shooting in RAW, I don't need to worry much about my white balance at all when I'm out shooting, because I can come back and fix that very easily and get a real-time preview of what that's going to look like. Myself, I prefer to use this eyedropper and just find a nice neutral gray spot, white or gray around there, and I'll just click that. And if I do need to do any kind of further corrections, I'll just adjust this slider a little bit, maybe to warm it up a tad. It kind of did a perfect job at first, so I'll just leave that there. And then just to kind of touch on a little bit, there's also detail corrections where you can do sharpening and noise reduction. And then there's also lens corrections, which are automatically applied. This is going to pick up on your lens, Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji. It'll pick up on the lens and automatically correct for the peripheral fall off, any kind of distortion or chromatic aberration. So I'll just turn that off and on so you can kind of see what's going on there. I really don't mess with this too much. I kind of just let it do its thing. So that's kind of the basics of how to correct the photo, at least the tone and color of the photo. There's still some work that we need to do. Obviously, there's this dust spot here and here, and then there's some distracting elements that I probably want to clean up as well. But before we do that, in my film strip view, right from develop, just by hitting my F key, if I wanted to actually take these same settings and apply them to maybe another couple photos that are in the same location, that I have the same camera, you know, underexposed, overexposed, doesn't matter, I can do that very easily right from within develop, right from the film strip view, or, you know, from browse in my grid view. So doing so, I'm just going to super select the photo that I want to sync the settings with other photos to. And I'm going to choose these photos over here. And I'm just going to hit this sync option. And so my super selected orange photo settings are now going to be applied to these settings right here, or this photo, so that it has the same settings. And you can see that this plus minus means that an adjustment has been made, so that I know that something has happened to this photo. So let me bump out of the film strip view here and go back to a full screen. Let me get back to fit. So hitting my space bar, just another way to kind of zoom in quickly in this full screen or film strip view. Another little nugget for you there. So next things that I want to fix in this photo are these dust spots. And I have these tools right over here. I have a crop tool. I have my local adjustment brush and gradient, which I'll get into that in just a moment. But I'm going to start here with my eraser and my retouch brush. We also have a clone stamp tool. For those of you who are familiar with the clone stamp, I'm sure a lot of you are based on the level of knowledge you guys said you had. So I won't spend any time on that. Retouch brush is exactly as it sounds. It's more like a smudge. That was not a very good job, so I'm going to do a Command-Z and redo that there and just get a little more precise. I'm using a mouse here, not a tablet, unfortunately. So you can see how easy, though, that was for me. If I do make a mistake, I can just hit Command-Z or Control-Z for Windows to get back that dust spot, and then you can just kind of refine your brush with the bracket keys, brush over it a little more precisely to get rid of that. Same thing up here. Bracket keys will make my brush bigger or smaller. I'm just going to hone that in there and brush that right over that. So again, this is the retouch brush. It's great for portrait retouching, blemishes, crow's feet, more of a smudge, not really a content-aware replacement. That's going to actually be our eraser brush here. The perfect eraser is going to act more like a content-aware tool. So if there's something you want to remove from the image, like this puddle right here is just kind of distracting me because it has a little bit of a highlight bloom on it there. So I'm going to just paint over that with my perfect eraser. And using the content-aware technology, it's going to find like pixels around it and replace it with something that, you know, looks like it belongs there. So I use the perfect eraser quite a bit for power lines, for people on a beach, for example, birds in the sky, even like a stump on a landscape photo. It's great at that. Just a content-aware style tool. So just paint over what you want to get rid of, and it'll do its job. Clone stamp, like I said, I won't spend too much time on that. It's going to act exactly as you would expect it's going to act. You have a target area you can select and then brush over, and it's going to paint the exact pixels over top of that. This area, though, the local adjustments are probably going to be where you live more in the develop module. At least myself, I tend to live in the local adjustments a little bit more than doing all these retouching dust spot removal stuff. So before I do that, let me actually crop this because the front of this image is kind of bothering me a little bit. So with our crop tool, I can also level right at the top. Let me actually move this Zoom conference bar out of the way. So in the crop tool, there is a leveling option. And let's see if I can do this here with my mouse. But if all you have to do is click and drag across the horizon line, and it looks like I missed it a little bit there, but it's already pretty straight, so I don't need to spend too much time on that. But yeah, level tool, just click it, drag it across a straight line. It's going to level your photo for you. And then we can just keep coming in and doing a little bit more cropping and refining to kind of make this a little bit more snazzy. And I'll just leave it right there so we have some of that image detail, or the water rock detail in the front. It's kind of cool looking. So next, like I said, local adjustments is probably going to be where I live the most, you know, and I like where we took this photo's foreground, but we kind of lost the sky a little bit. Kind of got a little overexposed with our midtones and our shadow sliders. So I'm going to use a local adjustment gradient on the top here. And I also have a brush, but I'm going to start using this gradient tool. And this gradient tool is going to basically do what these overall settings do, but on a local level. So you can see my mask right here. Everything that's white is being affected by a -1 exposure right here. And everything that's black is not being affected. You know, white reveals, black conceals. So I can choose some of the preset options like darken or lighten, for example. We'll lighten that by a stop. I can go in and adjust it manually, which is how I prefer to work. I also have more advanced options like a magic eye fixer or a toothbrush for whitening teeth, or even like a vibrance filter if you want to boost some of the colors in a specific area. So I'm just going to start with the darken option, and I'm just going to drag this down to the horizon line about, and I might stretch that. This is just a feather that I'm messing with here on the edges. I can flip that easily by hitting this circle and just dragging across, or I can come up to my advanced masking options here, choose some of invert, etc. Like I said, this is a beginner's webinar, so if you do want to learn more about all of these advanced options, Dylan has a webinar coming up on masking and blending, and there's also some videos on our YouTube channel. You can learn more about the next steps in develop effects, layers, etc. So as I move through this, like I said, white conceals, or sorry, white's going to show us exactly what we want. Black is going to cover up our mask. So as I move these sliders, everything on the top of my image is going to be affected by my changes. Everything below is not. So this is a great way for me to kind of boost the intensity, the dramatic nature of that sky. I might warm it up, but tone the saturation back just a little bit. Not too much though. Just to kind of give me something a little more dramatic up there. Reminds me a little more of when I shot it. So yeah, that's the basics of the local adjustments, but what if I actually want to brush some of that same filter in down here? Well, all I need to do is choose my brush up here, and as long as I'm set to paint in at the top, I'm still on the same adjustment layer. I can just simply brush in where I want this filter, or this local adjustment rather, to be applied. And conversely to that, I can set this to paint out and do the exact opposite. You know, so if you wanted to brush it off of this island over here and just kind of keep it in the clouds, that'd be an easy way to do that. You could feather this a little bit better, tone the opacity back on this brush to make it look a little better than what I'm doing here. But you have all these tools available. And like I said, all I'm doing is I'm just brushing in this local adjustment that I started with this gradient tool on the left with. And I can keep adding layers to that. You know, if I wanted to add a specific layer for vibrance, I can do so. And just brush that in, you know, maybe right on this sun glow here. Tone that opacity down just there. It won't affect the rest of the image. So just some, you know, basic ways to correct your photo in a little more localized way, targeted area. So that's the basics of the develop module. I'm going to cook through here and move right on to the effects module. Dylan, are there any questions on anything while I set this up?
Not so far, Mo. Just answering a few in question or in the Q&A module. So if you do have any questions, feel free to hit me up in there, and then I'll try to answer as many as I can. And then if one gets on there that Mo can answer, I'll stop him and let him answer for you guys.
All right, awesome. So moving through to the effects module, let's start out here. And I'm going to choose this photo, and I'm going to come into effects. Now, to give you a bird's eye view at effects, when I hit my tab key, I can actually see on the left here, I have presets, filters, I have my overall settings, and my local adjustments on the right. Hitting my tab key will get rid of those. Think of them like a drawer. So in effects, we have presets, we have filters. Presets are recipes of filters that either I have made or other people like Hudson Henry have made, Matt Kloskowski. We have a ton of these available for free on our website. So feel free to check those out. If you know about loyalty rewards, just on1.com/loyalty. There's a ton of them up there. So moving on, presets are recipes of filters. This is normally where I start in effects, is presets. I could start in filters if I wanted to just start from this base level image, but I've been working in effects so long that I already kind of know, based on the style I'm looking to get, I already have a preset made, or at least a direction made in presets that's going to get me going in that direction. So to back up a little bit, all of our tools, crop, local adjustments, our eraser, our retouch brush, our clone stamp are all here, but I now also have more masking options. And these masking options are going to let me refine my filters that I'm adding, and just, brush them in a little bit more artistically, a little bit more localized and selectively. So to start out with my workflow, what I would do is start in presets. And I already know I'm going to go for probably a faded and a matte look for this one right here, but you can see I have a ton of options already made, for color correcting, for black and white, for some LUTs and some different things for split toning, sports, etc. I'm going to start with the faded and matte collection here. And just by clicking on the preset category, I can get a small thumbnail view of what it looks like. I prefer to hit this little 4 square up at the top and use the quick view browser. And in here, I can actually adjust my thumbnail size. So if I want to see it on a global level, bird's eye, and see exactly, what I want to get started with, I can do so. And I'm probably going to start here. So I'll just click that. And as I add this preset, over in my overall settings here, you can see what it's actually added on the filter level. It's added a sunshine filter, a vignette filter, a split tone, and a tone enhancer. And I'll turn all these off so you can see kind of what each of these is going to do to the image. And this is kind of how I like to work in this, just looking at what each of these does to my image on a very base filter level first before I get started, so I can see, maybe I do not want a vignette. I might knock this out right now just by hitting that X key and then come back to that later. Maybe I want to affect the split tone a little bit or adjust it a little bit. I can do so just by clicking on this filter here. And so those of you who have been using Photo RAW for a while, you might be wondering how I'm getting my filters to collapse by themselves. If you are wondering that, up on the top under Window, there is Solo Mode. So if I uncheck this right now, as I click on my filters, it's going to expand them all at once. I know that there's a place for this. I don't prefer this, but if you are interested in doing that, window menu at the top, solo mode, you can see with it checked on, it just kind of keeps it a little more condensed, how I prefer to work. So like I said, move through, you can adjust each one of these filters if you want to, or you can keep adding filters to it, which is what I'm going to do. I like what these did. I knocked out the vignette. I'll come back to that later. I'm going to start here just adding a filter. And I'm going to start adding this dynamic contrast filter, which pretty much everyone who's used ON1 Photo RAW knows about. And I'll turn this off and on so you can see exactly what it's doing. It's adding a tremendous level of depth to her outfit, to her hair, but it's a little bit too much on her face, and it's adding a little bit of noise to that background there. So the first thing I can do is I can just paint this out, just like we were doing in the develop module. All I need to do is make sure I have my filter selected here. I'm going to come over to my masking brush, not my local brush, just my masking brush here. And I'm going to make sure I'm set to paint out. And I'm going to just do a couple swipes here so that you can see on my masking view, anywhere I paint is going to paint out and appear black, because that filter is not being applied to what is black. It is being applied to what is white. And you can see that showing up over here as well in a small little thumbnail view, which all this is great until you get to the hair of the image or of the subject. You know, what are we going to do when we get to this edge? Well, we have the perfect brush built in. And this perfect brush tool is going to allow you to essentially sample colors that are what the minus sign touches and just paint out anything that is that color. So anything that's not that color is not going to be affected when I use this perfect brush. And all I did was click on this. I have it set to paint out. And the absolute key is I'm just going to keep the minus sign in the colors that I want to get rid of. Now you can see though that some of that is kind of bleeding into her hair. And as I mentioned at the start, paint out is a good way to use filters, but it's not how I would prefer to use this filter specifically. But I am going to just show you how this works with the perfect brush. We are going to get back to this later, and then I can just keep painting out as I go through. So this masking view just right down here. And to turn that, let me actually paint this off her face real fast so yeah, you guys can see more of what's happening when I turn that off and on. So here is off and here is on. So you can see it's only affecting her hair and her blouse now. Not the greatest mask in the world, but it'll, at least looks a little bit better than where we started. So as I mentioned, this would not be how I would prefer to work with this filter. I would actually prefer to paint this in from the start rather than apply it and paint it out. So if I come down to my mask view right here and click onto it, I get my advanced options. I can actually reset this mask and start over right from these advanced options, which I'm going to do right now. I could also copy and paste it. So if I wanted to, add this mask to another filter, that's a great way to do that. Again, that's an advanced feature. This is kind of advanced, so I'll be quick about it. I'm going to reset this mask so it applies to the whole image. And now I'm actually going to invert this mask so that it does not apply to the image at all. And you can see there, nothing has been applied. I'm actually going to set this to paint in now. And I'm only going to paint this in where I want it to appear. So no matter what filter I choose, I can simply click on it, add it to my stack, invert it, choose paint in, and make sure I'm on my paint in brush, and easily paint in any filter that I want. And I'm just briefly brushing this in on her hair. You could get more refined, and again, this isn't the greatest mask, but you get the idea. And to keep moving through this, I can just continue adding different layers to this. If I do want to add my vignette now to this as my kind of finishing touch, I can do so. I can adjust this opacity of this layer on an individual level. I can even adjust, just kind of a quick tip with the vignette, I can adjust the where the spot point on that is going to be. So I'll just leave that there. And then, like I did in the develop module, I can add local adjustments as well. So portrait shooters out there, this would be the place to fix eyes or lips if you wanted to make those stand out a little bit more. I'm going to be very quick about this. I'm not going to get very precise with my mask. And I'll tone this back just a tad. So there's off on her eyes, and there's on, just a little magic eye fixer adjustment. Again, do a better job masking than I just did there. And then, yeah, I can keep adding layers to this. I can even rename these layers. So, if I wanted to maybe add just a little bit of vibrance to her lips there and tone this super far back so it just has a tiny little bit of boost to those lips there. I can change the name to lips vibrance. Just a way for me to organize my layers a little better. I could delete this layer if I wanted to delete this. I can go right back to my overall settings and adjust that dynamic contrast a little bit more if I feel it's too strong, or maybe that vignette I'm still just, it's a little bit too dark for my liking. Maybe it's not dark enough for my liking. It's all quickly, easily adjustable. All this is non-destructive as well. So if I am in browse and want to just start this over, I can just hit reset and it'll send me right back to my original RAW file or JPEG file. Doesn't matter what it is. Everything is non-destructive. I can save these all as a preset, as I mentioned from the beginning, if I wanted to. So just to show you how to do that, settings, save settings as a preset. We'll call this one Michaela. And faded and matte, save, and we should see that appear over here. Michaela 1, there's our preset. So just quick ways to edit. As I mentioned, this is a great way to, presets at least are a great way to correct any kind of color casting. If you're shooting in a studio with a ring light and it's causing a magenta color cast, you just on that import option in browse, you can add a quick preset to fix that, so you don't even have to worry about that when you start editing. Just quick tips to help you save time in your workflow, help you edit your photos faster. I'll show you a before. Here's a before. Here's an after. I mean, that didn't take me more than 5-10 minutes to get to that point. And now that I have that saved as a preset, it's gonna make it even faster for me to get there. So that's the basics of effects. Dylan, why don't you fire any questions you have at me? We have about 20 minutes left in the webinar, so I'm going to cruise really fast through HDR and Pano right now. Are there any questions on effects, Dylan?
Not at this time, no. You're doing really good, man. If one pops up that has to do with it, then I'll pause for you.
All right, cool. So HDR module and the panoramic module are very, very straightforward. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. All you're going to do is shoot or click your images that you shot in your brackets, and you are going to click on HDR. And it's going to auto merge your brackets together so that you get the tonality from front to back throughout the whole image. I now have my develop module so that I can then, adjust any kind of tone and color that I need to on that. And then I also have an HDR look filter that's actually from effects that just kind of adds a glowy, more surreal look to it if that's what you're going for as well. The main thing to take away from this is how fast that was. I'll just cancel and do that merge again for you. Just click my photos, choose HDR. About 5 seconds, 7 seconds maybe, got us to a merged image. So that is the HDR module. Those of you doing that, you should be pretty excited, or at least think it's a welcome addition to ON1 Photo RAW. Same with the panoramic module. If you are doing any kind of astrophotography or any kind of just pano shots that you want to stitch together, exactly the same way that the HDR module works. You're just going to select your images, choose Pano, and it's going to add those images all stitched together into one singular image for you to edit. So these are a little bit larger files, it looks like, than the HDR ones I shot, but same idea, super fast, stitching them together. It works in a matrix of photos as well, so it does not have to be a straight line. Those of you shooting astrophotography might be interested in that. So yeah, that's Pano, that's HDR. Really straightforward stuff. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but any questions you have, feel free to ask Dylan. He can definitely help you out. Layers, though, I saw there were a ton of people asking questions on layers. Seems to be what people are most curious about. And that that's probably the consensus across the board. And there's a couple of routes that I can take, and I'll start out with this landscape one here. Layers is where you are going to do whoops, not resize. I hope I didn't mess that up there. It's going to try and resize all three of those images. So layers is going to be where you, I think I might actually want to cancel this real fast because I should not have clicked resize. Sorry about that. There we go. So layers, rather. I'm going to add these three photos as a layer. And while that loads, I'll kind of talk a little bit about layers could be an entire webinar of its own, just based on theory and how to use layers. So I'm going to give you guys the basics of how to use our layers and how the tools work. You know, any kind of head swaps, any kind of sky swaps, any kind of compositing that you're trying to do. Fine art photographers I know use this quite a bit with textures, backgrounds. This is your home for that, is the layers module. Those of you who are familiar with Photoshop, this should be very familiar, very straightforward to you. In my opinion, it's a lot easier to use and it's a lot more user-friendly. And I've been using Photoshop for quite some time. So once this fires up here, and I do apologize, the Zoom conference kind of lags the software a little bit when we're doing these larger composites together. So give me one moment while this loads up here. There we go. And just to kind of touch on, there are some built-in extras into the app, like skies, textures, backgrounds, some things that you can jump into and easily access if you're into doing sky swaps. There's a lot of cool stuff already built into the app here. So to move along, let's go through what we have in layers. I have on my left side all my tools that you remember, but I have more tools. I have more refined masking tools, more crop tools, because this is where we're going to do our compositing and our fine art stuff. So I have anything I need to do that right in here. I'm actually going to get rid of that so that that's not confusing to you guys real fast. Sorry about that. So to get started, we are going to take this image and merge it together with these images and do a nice sky swap. So let's start out getting our layers in order. You can easily click and drag your layers around. You can turn your layers off. You can make sure you're working on the correct layer by clicking on it and having it as the selected layer. You know, whether you're in ON1 or Photoshop, that's going to be the case. Make sure you're on the selected layer when you're working. So to get started, I'm just going to work through these layers. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut out this rock. I think it's haystack rock from the background so I can move it on to my other images here. I'm going to choose my brush tool right here. Should be familiar. I've been using it the whole time. And I'm going to make sure I'm set to paint out at the top. Oops, let me drag this Zoom conference thing out of the way one more time. Keeps popping back up there. So I can adjust my brush size by using my bracket key there, and I'm going to do that just to kind of paint away. You can see my layer underneath is coming through as I paint that layer off. I'm actually going to turn those off so that you can see a little more of a photographer's view, I guess you could say, of what that mask is going to look like. And I'm just going to brush away very as close as I can get, at least, without using my perfect brush for now, because I'm just going to turn on that perfect brush and do exactly what I did with my dynamic contrast filter. I'm just going to make sure my minus sign stays in that blue colored sky. And before I go down, you can see right here, there's kind of this, you know, this loop that would be impossible to mask, you know, with a selection tool almost. But coming in here with this allows me just to brush right over that. It's not affecting my rock at all. You can see it's not even affecting this water down here because it's a completely different color. So that's kind of the basics of how you'd use the perfect brush here. I'm not going to really worry about it too much down there because the spot I'm going to move this to is going to be roughly the same in my final image. So I'm just going to kind of clean this up a little bit on the bottom, but not worry about it too much for right now unless I need to. And I can resize this just by clicking the move tool here And I'm going to hold shift to keep my aspect ratio when I do this resize. And let me turn on my layer below it so it doesn't look ridiculous here as I do this. So let me just keep moving this until I find a nice spot for it. And if I hold the shift key, just going to adjust that to about there. And I still might clean up this mask just a little bit. It looks like it needs a little bit of work. So just to kind of be super quick about that, I'm just gonna a little closer with my feather. I could extend this feather if I wanted to. Oops, looks like I messed up a little bit. That's okay. I can paint that back in really fast if I want to. And I'm just gonna paint in the whole bottom here and do a quick paint out. Whoops, quick paint out again. All right, I'm gonna leave that as such for now. I think that's good enough. And I'm actually gonna merge these layers together now because what I wanna do is mask the sky out behind this now, and I want them to be on the same level. So down here, I'm gonna choose merge layer. It's gonna merge my cutout now with this background, and you can see in the thumbnail, it is now a part of that image. So I'm going to turn on this bottom layer now because I want to bring the sky in. And to align it first, I'm going to adjust this opacity back on my top layer so that I can see the horizon line on this bottom layer right down here. And I'm going to click, make sure I'm selected on the layer, and go to my move tool. And I'm just going to bring the horizon line close to. I might actually expand this layer just a little bit so it overlaps the edge. Gives me a nice stretched sky look. And I'll hit enter now to lock that in place. And let me get back to my top layer up here and bring that opacity back so it's fully at 100%. And now I'm going to choose my gradient mask tool like we chose in the develop module to bring that sky in. And just like my brush tool, it's going to erase the layer that it's working on, or cut out the layer that I'm working on. Just like in develop, this is my feather. You know, where that horizon line is, or that middle of that gradient tool is where that's going to start being affected. And you know, this is all well and good, but we lost part of our haystack rock here. So just like we did in develop, I'm just going to choose my brush tool and I'm going to set that to paint in. And now I can do the reverse with my perfect brush and paint that in. You know, I don't really have to worry about the sky. Whoops, I kind of messed up there and went overboard, but I can paint that out in just a second. But as long as that plus stays on those color tones of this rock, I'm not going to have a problem painting that in and not worrying about my sky behind it. So very common tools throughout ON1 Photo RAW, just a little bit more refined tools to work with. Just gonna keep painting that out here. Actually might undo that and adjust that opacity so that it's a little bit smaller. And do the paint out here. I think I might have actually painted in this whole layer, it looks like. So yeah, we can reset that if we wanted to. Again, I'm not gonna spend too much time on doing this perfectly for you guys. If you did wanna go back to that gradient though, you can just click on here and easily keep adjusting this as you move through. Looks like I painted off there so I can see that mask. I can go back to my brush tool and I can paint that back in, turn my opacity up to 100 and turn off my brush. Paint that in real fast there, and then we'll start over so that you guys can see that if you do make a mistake, it's very easy to get back to where we started from. I don't know why that showed up like that. Let's just start over from the beginning. So that is ON1 Photo RAW in a nutshell. I'm not going to get into resize too much. It's pretty straightforward what it does. Enlargement of your photo. up to 1,000% without losing any clarity, detail, no pixelation, anything like that. Jump back to browse here. And I could go through and do a couple more layers work, but Dylan actually does have a webinar coming up on masking and blending specifically. So if you are interested to learn more about those advanced features of layers, about some of the masking and blending features and effects, definitely tune in for that webinar with Dylan. You can sign up for that at on1.com/webinars. Before I leave, I'm going to leave you with one last feature, the export drawer, export pane. Just going to choose an image real fast and show you how to do that. So when you have an image ready to print or ready to send to Facebook or to a client, all you need to do is select that image or images. Down here at the bottom right, there's an export option. Or under the file menu at the top, there is an export option as well. Basically what that's going to do is open up the export drawer here. That's going to give you very, very similar options to what resize is going to give you in terms of you can change the photo size, add a watermark. All of these are available in the resize module, which is why I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But there are some videos on our website for how to use resize more advanced and what all these tiling, sharpening, gallery wrap tools do. Watermark, if you wanted to add a watermark to your image, you could do so very easily just by clicking on this. You have the watermark tool already built in, or a watermark already made. Just easily find that file. You can add it wherever you want to. Rename the file, choose the file location, change the file type. If you're working in PSD, you can change it to TIFF, JPEG, PNG. And that is pretty much the basics of the export module. That is how to get started in ON1 Photo RAW. Remember, everything here is completely non-destructive. So if I do want to go back, and I'll just show you guys that before you head out here, come to headshots, we'll go find that edited photo of Michaela. Let's take it back to the beginning. All I need to do is come down to the bottom, hit reset all, and I'm back at the beginning. Now, let's say I want to get back to where I just was. Remember that preset that we made? I can come right here in my browse module to faded and matte. I can come find our Michaela 1 preset, and I can just add that quickly. And that's going to apply that preset right to my image there. So start, stop, doesn't matter. You can go from beginning to end very quickly, use presets, navigate throughout ON1 Photo RAW, use all those features. It's all non-destructive. Don't feel like you're ever going to lose your starting image. Are there any questions on anything at all, Dylan?
No, I think I got them all answered in the Q&A, and then it looks like you went over pretty much everything.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm going to close it down now, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Everything will be posted on the blog, on our YouTube, on Facebook later today. So again, thank you for joining me here today. Hopefully this gets you guys moving in a good direction with ON1 Photo RAW. And don't forget to check out some of our webinars coming up, on1.com/webinars with an S at the end. And I hope to see you guys here soon. Have a great day.